All right, fellow book people, November is rapidly approaching NaNoWriMo, and before I descend into that, I'd like to make a video about, hey, 2 for 1 here. The first book is Clodia by Robert DeMaria, a 1965 historical novel, all about Gaius Valerius Catullus, born in 84 BC, died at the age of 30, and his love affair with Clodia. Catullus was indeed a historical figure. He's a Roman Latin poet who, instead of writing about gods and goddesses for the most part, actually his surviving work is all about sort of his personal life. It's deeply romantic in a lot of ways, but yet still it's very body and very to the bone and very kind of blunt in a way, but also quite a beautiful kind of an elegant voice. That indeed, this is his a book of his poetry, which it's a mark of how successful I think this book is because I finished Clodia, his story of his love affair with Clodia Pulchra, or Clodia ni Meti, her husband. I finished this book and went, oh, I need to read his poems again, because that's indeed why I picked this up. Steve Donahue, of course, mentioned this as a book that he loved about Catullus, a historical novel about Catullus, and I love the poetry of Catullus, so I read this and then went, oh, I need to reread Catullus or Catullus or whatever. Catullus. I'm going to go with Catullus. I'm going to be proud and stop shaking books around at the camera. So yes, it's 1965 historical fiction, all about this country boy, Catullus, who gets visited by Clodia and her husband, who's kind of the man. He's one of the men of Caesar, and indeed Caesar is Caesar actually has his father actually kind of supplies goods, services for Caesar. So you sort of on that side of the political divide. We're just going to start up. They've already had the Catiline conspiracy and all that, where Cicero, who shows in this book, has put people to death. So this is Clodia and her husband visit Bumpkin. Well, not Bumpkin, but he's rich, but he's rich in the kind of provinces sort of way, family of Catullus, where they meet. There's something there. Clodia, who's an older woman, says like, I can see, like, you should come to Rome, and I'll introduce you to the right people, because indeed, as this book goes along, you realize that Clodia, this is written in 1965, but Clodia is sort of like a Paris Hilton type. She's like a daughter of the most famous family, and her life is continuously scandalous. Scandalous in that sort of way where it's like, if she was a man, you could see how her life would go on a different way, but in this deeply misogynistic, patriarchal society where indeed a lot of times when they refer to women in historical record, they disappear once they become detached from men, because they just don't get tracked. It's because everything gets tracked from the male line. So this book is told primarily from Catullus's point of view, and he is a young poet, and he is very passionate, and he's all about love and how we're going to be faithful together forever. And there's all the voices around him saying, Catullus, she's a wild one, and she sleeps with everybody, and she's really actually open about this. It's one of these things of she's not really trying to hide stuff from Catullus. This is Catullus as the romantic, really trying to build this woman up as the paragon of virtue. And indeed, when you get to his poetry, there are a couple of ones where it's like, oh, beautiful lesbia, because in the poems he called her. It is alleged that he calls her lesbia. And indeed, this is the thing with all this stuff that's from the past. There's a pretty good case. I think they make a very good case for saying that Clodia is the lesbia of his poetry, but it's not 100% certain. So this is indeed a fictional imagining of, yes, that's true. Yes, she's got all this stuff with her thuggish brother, who's got a continuing kind of feud, vendetta against Cicero. I'm going to say Cicero. in this book. And indeed, Clodia's had it's in this imagining, Clodia has had some sort of very intense relationship with Cicero, which has not ended up working. So this is not Clodia is not like kind of your airheaded. I mean, this is the thing. If I think about our own culture of how young women or beautiful women rise to prominence, and they get kind of they get branded as, oh well, they're a slut, they're an airhead. And it turns out, as years go by, you find out that, you know what? Someone like Kim Kardashian, someone like Paris Hilton, smart businesswomen. I mean, you may not agree with everything they do and all that, but they're not dummies. They've amassed amazing amounts of wealth on their own. They've amassed a media empire on their own. And I get it's hard not to like think of this 1965 book as something that's commenting on now and of like how we portray women. And indeed, maybe this is something of like 1965. You could look at the women there and how they were rising to prominence. And, but you know, it's striking how someone gets kind of construed as that, or, you know, oh, she's a woman who has, you know, she does like to sleep around. She likes to, you know, be with men and enjoy them. And like, what's wrong with that? Why is it that the men are able to do that? Indeed, there's a kind of a thing saying like, oh, well, you know, a man shouldn't be too faithful to his wife because that would show that he's being subservient to his wife. He should sleep around. That was a thought at the time. And you know, you can't help, you know, think of basically all the ideas of masculinity now. I always go down this trail. I know I'm always banging on about this, but I think this is a especially good book for that. The book does sometimes I feel like the book stops to tell me what I already figured out sometimes about stuff like that. Like it could have limited hints, but sometimes you get the friends or you get Clodia kind of stopping to explain things where you think it could have been more subtly done. The end of the book is interesting because it has an epilogue, which is in the voice of Clodia, which at first it's funny because I read this and then I went back and I'm going to read this, so it gave me time to think about this, because at first I think I was slightly disappointed by the epilogue of like, oh, you're finally just kind of, you're giving us Clodia, but the Clodia that Robert DeMaria gives us is actually this wonderfully complex woman. And indeed, while it confirms like sort of all my thoughts about Clodia beforehand, you know, she's never really never portrayed as an airheaded slut, kind of, yeah, all the horrible pejoratives. You know, she's hidden behind Catullus, because Catullus in this book is such the romantic. And it's interesting because if I switch slightly over to the poetry right now, Catullus has got all this poetry which is very earthy and very bawdy, but there's also poems in here which are amazingly done, which I don't think I even noticed the first time, which are all about like, you know, marriage poems, and just sort of like, you know, how about, you know, oh, the wife is going to be kind of become yoked to the husband and is going to give forth its, you know, she's going to produce a child, she's going to produce a male heir, and it's very traditional. And it's like, you know, that's the flip side of kind of romance and love, and only love is, there's also behind that just sort of this very kind of traditional thing of how I see women, how I see marriage, which comes out of this. Or there's a poem in here which I'm no classicist. Catullus is like it for me, for like, this guy really appealed to me, but of Attis, and being this guy who falls into this cult, chops off his penis, and then becomes not a woman, not a man. I mean, I'm sure it's ancient versions of transphobia. Maybe on one side, I've got no idea what I'm talking about here of any context, but just the idea of kind of a discomfort with, crossing a boundary there. And it's interesting because while there's a discomfort of crossing boundaries here, Catullus is obviously also a bit fascinated with those boundaries. And he is apparently a poet who really inspired someone, really deeply affected someone like Ovid, who is obviously the metamorphosis guy and all about crossing boundaries and exploring and all that stuff. So it was interesting how I could really feel that Robert, like, it was lovely to go and read this, because then it's like, oh, I can see how this interacts with that, interacts with this. And at the same time, I mean, I think this is the wonderful thing of, you get historical novels like this, which is one guy's imagining of, oh, this is what I envision what their relationship might have been like, going from maybe the poems, or also going from, because we also know Clodia because she features in Cicero's writings as well. That's apparently the other historical source. This is a woman who fascinated these kind of the great men of their time. And it's wonderful how, like, someone like Robert DeMaria, I've probably been saying his name wrong the whole time, is also fascinated, because in the end, it's a book that all circles around this woman. And I think at the end, I'm actually quite happy that he gives her a voice. He doesn't let her become, he says, I'm going to imagine her voice, the voice of a woman who had all these men around talking about her. You know, she was, you know, there's trials over her. I haven't even gone into her brother, who is a horrible, sounds like a horrible brute, thuggish politician who got up gangs and beat up people, who ended up, you know, part of his vendetta with Cicero drove Cicero out of Rome. So yeah. That is my my video, my reaction to. I think I'm going to pick up Cicero. I'm going to continue reading Catullus. Well, you know, that's a lovely thing about that. That's it. That is it of Catullus. My translation here is by Horace Gregory. It's an old translation. I actually got a new one by Daisy Dunn, which might be more accurate and stuff like that, but it just didn't have the kind of the flowing language that I like. And I'm someone who's always going to pick readability, beauty over fidelity to the particular words, just because, also probably because I am such the dilettante, and I'm only going to dip in and out of Catullus. If I am, I'm going to have fun and enjoy myself doing it. I am no scholar me. So yes. So that is my review of Clodia by Robert DeMaria. And yes, more videos later.